Everybody doing? Yeah, man. So grateful for you students having a fantastic week this last week. I'm glad you're home now. Hopefully you got a little bit of sleep and all that kind of good stuff. Sure grateful for Drew, Dax, Dave, and Stacy leading us this evening. Very grateful for them. You know, Clinton and Ren have been threatening me for years now at making a calendar of notable quotables that I've said through the years. And these are perhaps maybe not the most quotable things you'd want said maybe about you, and so or things that you want repeated that you've said in the past. Quotes kind of like, well, it's your own dumb fault for being stupid. Those would not be ones you would want to show up on a calendar. And this is what they've threatened to do, is to create a calendar and where there's one quote per month of the things that I've said. You know, I mean, where it's things like, you know, yes, it is true that everything happens for a reason. Sometimes that reason is you're an idiot. And it's like, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, this is Confession Sunday. That here I am, I have to tell you these things that I've said in the past, and I had to write them down because, listen, oh, how about this one? Put that in your pipe and smoke it. Maybe not the thing that you want quoted, you know, I don't know. It's like, man, I don't know. But the bottom line is usually these phrases come after an encounter with a difficult person. And we've all had these encounters with difficult people. In my line of work, I get the privilege of doing this on a regular basis. And so folks, that there's this hardness and there's difficulty, there's challenge and all those kinds of things, brokenness, people that they're making decisions that you kind of like, man, I really wish that wouldn't be the case, and maybe decisions that I might not make personally, or that any of us as a Christ follower would like to make personally. It's these decisions that are made, though. The problem is, though, whenever these decisions are made and whenever we encounter people who are dealing with some really hard stuff sometimes, and you're thinking, man, this is at your own reason, like you've created this situation here because of decision making or whatever the case may be. It's really, really hard to not be critical, right? Do you find yourself where it's really easy to point fingers? It's really easy maybe to pass judgment or to be snide about it or whatever the case may be. And so we find ourselves in this reality here. And our natural response, or my natural response, maybe this is just me, but my natural response, you know, whenever you see something, it honestly is to be critical and to distance myself or maybe ourselves from that by making sure that everybody around knows where we stand on perhaps maybe this issue. We just got to make sure everybody understands where we are because we don't want there to be any confusion. And so there's this distancing from the difficulty and the hardness and the brokenness and all this kind of thing. Well, today, we're going to work through God's desire to modify our natural response into a supernatural one, where we talk about the difference between what we naturally are drawn to and just the ways that we're naturally drawn to handle things, to where we have these supernatural ways. And today is Serve Sunday. This is the Sunday where we're charged to bring joy to people who are far from God. But this population of people that it's really easy to point fingers at, but the reality is that that's not who God wants us to be. So we're going to be in James chapter 1 this evening. We're going to go through the whole chapter, but we're going to start at the end on verse 27. Religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this: to look after orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world. Jason Johnson, he's a well-known author, blogger, especially in the foster and adopt world. And he did a really, really fine job of parsing this verse. And so we're going to let him just kind of to speak to this and the verse in its full meaning. And so let's listen in as we get started.
Leads us to James 1:27, where it says, religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this: to visit orphans and widows in their affliction, and to keep oneself unstained by the world. You know, this is an interesting verse because it's often referred to as a command, as a mandate, when in fact it's actually really not. There's no command. This verse isn't telling us to do anything. It's actually describing something for us. It's describing something really beautiful for us. And so let's pick it apart just real quick here. Here's what it's describing for us. This is seminary, by the way. You take really fine verses and you mark them up and X them out, and it's a lot of fun. And here's why, because it just helps us to see underneath the surface of what we're reading. So that word religion there isn't our word religion. It's not like cathedrals and steeples. This word religion literally means an outward display of something that's inwardly true. And that's what we're talking about here, an outward display of the gospel, which is inwardly true in us. And so James is now describing one of the purest and most undefiled outward displays of the gospel that this world will ever see. You want to put the gospel on display with great vividness and clarity and purity? Then visit or move, step towards, get involved with. This is a hard one. Because the world we live in says, avoid hard and broken things at all costs. Insulate yourself from them. Isolate yourself from them. Move across town. Structure a life where you can live out the rest of your days pretending like hard and broken things do not exist. And then James says, how about we be a people who move and step towards and get involved with the most vulnerable in our society. He uses orphans and widows, again, as representatives, as descriptives of that, because in his culture, orphans and widows, the husbandless and the fatherless, were considered to be the most worthless. And so he's using them in really a profound way. If you were the audience of James at that time, and you heard James say one of the purest and most undefiled ways for us to put the work of God on display is to get involved with orphans and widows, there would be a collective gasp in the room. What? Really? Them? Them? Yes. The most vulnerable in our society. That's our people. That's where we go. That's where the gospel's put on display with a vividness and a purity unlike anything else. And so we could argue very easily that homelessness and incarceration and trafficking and the struggling neighbor across the street, if we were to go to James and say, James, you didn't mention any of them, he would say, yes, I did. This is representative of the most vulnerable in society, that we would be a people who move and step towards and get involved with them. Because when we do that, it puts the work of Jesus on display in pure and undefiled ways. So the implications of this are pretty clear. That one of the purest and most undefiled demonstrations of the gospel is to see hard places and broken people and move towards them, not away from them. This is what James 1:27 is suggesting, that you and I would become the kind of people that say, I see you where you are, and I'm coming after you. And when we do that, the people around us say, gosh, why are you doing that? You're supposed to insulate and isolate. Why are you doing that? Why are you purposely stepping into hard and broken places? Why would you do that? Your family will look at you like you're crazy. Your friends will look at you like you're crazy. Your mother-in-law will look at you like you're crazy, right? You'll look in the mirror sometimes and say, hey, you're crazy. What are you doing? And you're right, it's crazy. It's crazy that God would do this for us. And it's crazy that he would then invite us and give us the privilege to step in and do the same for others. It's crazy.
I see you and I'm coming after you. Man, what a powerful phrase. The world we live in says avoid hard things at all costs. Insulate and isolate yourself from them. Yet here it is. One of the purest and undefiled demonstrations of the gospel is to see hard places and broken people and move towards them, not away from them. To bring joy to people who are from hard places. To bring joy to those hurt people who are hurting people. To move towards them when everything in you wants to run the other way. To answer the question, how, we're going to have to hit rewind and go back to the top of James chapter 1. And so let's check out verse 12. Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial. And we're going to focus on this word trial a pretty good bit tonight. Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love him. And so when we look at this word trial and we think about the trials that are there, there is a population of people that is very difficult to work with. And so for us as Christ followers, especially we know Matthew chapter 25, and we know that it's important for us to care for those who are who are broken, who are in prison, who are sick, thirsty. Those we know the people that are strangers, and we invite them in. We understand, because we talk about this a lot. We've talked about this a lot for years as a church, that these populations of people, it's very important for us to lean in. It's very important for us to draw near. Tonight, I want to talk about another population of people that we don't talk about a whole lot. Primarily because this population of people are the folks that 90% probably of Americans want to be like. They want to be like this group of people. It's the people that look like they got it all together. They got way more money than other people. They drive the right cars. They live in the right homes. Their families are very well put together. Everything looks really, really good. It's very attractive. And it is the goal for the vast number of people that are walking the American streets or driving the American streets. So we're going to talk about this population of people, just kind of expound upon what it means to move towards those who are hurting. What it means to move towards those. I know some of you are thinking, why are we talking about this population? And we'll get there as to why this is. But we need to wrap our minds around the fullness of humanity. And tonight I would like to suggest that there are many in our society that are viewed as successful and powerful that may be incredibly vulnerable. They may be incredibly vulnerable. What about those people who were abused as a child, and they've turned that abuse into corporate success, into a life of discipline as an overcompensation so that they are controlling their situation as opposed to having the threat of someone controlling them ever again? Could this possibly be a vulnerable population of people? I'd like to suggest that it definitely is. Because this is a group of people that's taking control at a level that our world looks at and says, that's success. That is pulling yourself up by the bootstraps. That is making something from nothing. That's it. That's our goal. But there's still that vulnerable child who has never healed from the hurt of the aunt or uncle that took their innocence. They're still hurting inside, turning up the control to make sure nobody takes advantage of them ever again. And they have low trust in people. They create shrapnel everywhere they go. We've all worked for people like this before, right? It's an interesting reality. Their dysfunction breeds dysfunction. Their hurts unintentionally and sometimes even intentionally cause hurts to those around them. What about this population of people? Is it important for us to move towards them too? I'd like to say yes. Could it be that the trials we find ourselves in, where we find ourselves as the recipient of hurts from a population of people that many people want to be like? Could it be that this trial, and I would never suggest that this trial was something that was orchestrated by God, but I'd like to suggest that God has great opportunity in the middle of this moment, in the middle of this circumstance, in the middle of this trial. See, it's natural to talk about this group of people and point fingers. It's natural to be critical of. It's natural to distance ourselves to make sure that coworkers know this is an us-them thing. This is us over here, that's them over there. This is that population. But our job is to bring joy to people. Our job is to speak life into everybody we come in contact with. Whether the person knows Jesus and is following Jesus, or whether they're far from God, the job that we have is to bring joy, is to usher in the Prince of Peace to whatever situation we're in. And so there is this population of people that we need to add. We need to add to the list. James 1:13 says these words, says, "When tempted, no one should say, 'God is tempting me,' for God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt anyone." So this is the proof that God's not orchestrating this. We got to be careful. God gets the blame for a lot of things. But God is not orchestrating your trials. God is not the one that is orchestrating the destruction in your life. But it is very true that God is extremely near through the trials. God is extremely near through the chaos that is life. Whomever responsibility it is for the situation that you find yourself in. God is near. And it's not that God is creating these. However, there is temptation in the midst of trials. Because there is no question, the moment of hurt, the propensity we have is to turn that hurt into another hurt. That's where we get phrases like, two wrongs don't make a right. We get these phrases because when we get hurt, our propensity is we're going to hurt the people who are hurting us. But the reality is this is not who we're called to be. This temptation is to be critical. The temptation is to have unforgiveness towards people, which we all know. Unforgiveness is like drinking poison and hoping something bad happens to the person we're not forgiven. It's a death sentence. There's no question about it. But God is extremely near to us in these trials, in these difficulties, to give us the strength, to give us words in order to make it through the trial. He's near to help us capture the opportunity to bring joy to people who are far from Him, who may not know Him. However, there's danger in this moment. This opportunity creates danger as well, because if we succumb to this temptation, the temptation of criticism, of judgment, of backbiting and undermining, if we stoop to this, the result is found in verse 14, and here it is. Each person is tempted when they're dragged away by their own evil desire. Here it is. The evil desire is, man, you're hurting me, I'm coming after you. That's all there is to it. We're dragged away by their own evil desire and enticed. Then after desire has conceived, the thought is there, it gives birth to sin. Out of the overflow, the mouth then begins to speak. And sin, when it is full grown, gives birth to death. So here's the equation for us. Criticism leads to the assumption of criticism. Here's what I mean by that. When you are critical of other people, you will assume people are going to be critical of you. When the words that come out of your mouth are accusatory and blaming and backbiting, you will assume other people are going to be doing the same thing about you. And this is a death sentence. Because you don't live a full life. This is not the fullness of life that God has for you and me. Because when we are critical and we assume others are critical of us, we're in this sick cycle of death. We're in this sick cycle of poison rather than life. And in a really weird way, isn't it crazy? If we've ever had the thought that we hope something bad happens to somebody else, is that from God? It's not. It's not from God that we hope somebody loses their job. It's not from God that we hope that somebody gets what they deserve. That's not from God. Because by God's grace, we have not gotten what we deserve. And so we can look at this and we go, oh my gosh, so this is a death sentence for life, and the result is fear. Fear that people are after you. Fear that people are after me. And there's an overcompensation that tends to happen. And so we insulate ourselves and we isolate ourselves from this onlooking world and this hurting world so that we're not at risk. It plays out at work. It plays out at home. You're critical in your mind about your bride, you're going to assume she's critical about you. You're critical about your husband, you're going to assume that he's critical about you. It will happen every time. The same thing is true. Children towards your parents, parents towards your children. That's all the way it is. If we're critical, we're going to assume criticism is coming back our way. And it's a death sentence. It creates death rather than bringing life to our situation. But check out what James says next in verse 16. Do not be deceived. It will not make you feel better for something bad to happen to somebody else. It will not make you feel better for the company to fail because you got fired. It will not. It will not make you feel better. This is not going to happen. Do not be deceived, my dear brothers and sisters. Here we go now. Every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of the heavenly lights, who does not change like the shifting shadows. He chose, get this, and this is a beautiful verse. He chose to give us birth through the word of truth, that we might be a kind of first fruits He created. You get that word, first fruits? We talk about this when we talk about money all the time. Have you ever seen yourself as a gift from God to this earth? To the people that you are in contact with? That God has created you specifically to bring hope, specifically to bring life, specifically to bring caring, goodness, compassion, all of these things towards very hurting people. And you were given birth through the word of truth. This is the truth about you. You are beautiful. You are wonderful. You are made with great intentionality and great purpose we might be a kind of first fruits of all he created, humanity. We're the ones that get to work this earth. We're the ones that get to care for people. We get to be the ambassadors of Jesus to this earth. What a privilege it is. This is very different than being critical and backbiting and all those kinds of things that is the going rate of humanity that we see. But don't be deceived by these things. You are a gift. You have been given a gift. And it is beautiful. And so when we look at trials, it's kind of a weird thing when we think about what Jesus does to turn these trials upside down. Something that is seen as terrible and awful. The reality is it can be a beautiful gift. Not that God is creating these things, but the gift of God is that he will follow, he will care for, he will be with us through to the very end of the age. And so what we do is we seek truth. We don't seek our opinion. We seek truth. And when we seek truth, there will be freedom. When there is the seeking of truth, it always produces freedom. And so we have to ask some questions. When we find ourselves in these trials and these interactions with hard people, and the thing we want to do is to be critical and to distance ourselves and to run the other way so that we don't have to deal with them anymore, the reality is we can respond in a different way. We can respond by asking a question, why does this bother me so much? And one would think that the question is answered very easily, because I'm hurting. Well, why am I hurt? Why in the world does this thing my boss did bother me so much? Why is it that my coworker, their actions, their reactions are driving me crazy? Why is it that my child is about to make me pull my hair out? Why is it that the person of a different race or culture that I just can't wrap my mind around, why is this bothering me? Why? Is there something I can learn about me through this? You see the difference? Rather than pointing fingers at other people, we're looking here and going, what's going on inside? What's happening inside of me? Because here is the truth. The very thing that a person gets most frustrated with is oftentimes something they struggle with themselves. And we can determine how this plays out in many ways. I mean, it may be that you've overcome something and you're no longer the controlling person that you once were. And so to interact with somebody who's controlling and trying to control you, you realize you've been set free from that, and it's extremely frustrating. Or maybe the fact is you're jealous. You want their job, you want their role, you want their life, you want their situation, you want their family, you want these things, and you're jealous. Maybe that's what's going on inside. Maybe it's that you grew up and your dad was controlling dad, and you're like, never again will I work for somebody like that, because I'm not going to be like that. And I won't let anybody control me like that ever again. Maybe that's the reason. I don't know what the reason is. But when you ask these questions, you ask God and say, man, why is this bothering me so much? Oftentimes we can discover, if we boil it down to its most basic point, there's something going on inside of our hearts that we need God to clean. And so what a powerful response, rather than naturally be critical, to supernaturally look and peer inside of you. What's going on inside here? Why am I here? And then the most beautiful thing can happen. All of a sudden God looks at you and says, you're the first fruits of this situation. You are my gift to this moment. You are my gift to this situation. You are my voice. When you open your mouth, I'm going to flow forgiveness and love and grace and strength and mercy to change the world. To this is what we are given. We are here to speak life rather than death. That's why we are on this planet. That's why God has captured our hearts and turned us towards Him. That's what it means to bring joy. We allow the Spirit of God, through the person of Jesus, to drive out fear and to leave peace in its wake. That's who we're called to be. James 1:19, my dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. You ready? Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. It's not rocket science. We get it. Hard to do, though. Therefore, get rid of all moral filth and the evil that is so prevalent, and humbly accept the word. Humbly accept the truth. Humbly accept Jesus, planted in you, which can save you. Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. See, we're not here just to go to church. We're not here just to check a list of church activities. We're here to receive the truth, to launch it, and live it out throughout this coming week. And if we do that 52 times a year, guess what happens? That's 52 truths that are activated in our lives every year. That will change the world. I promise you. I promise you it will change this area. It will change the world. It will be amazing. James 1:23, anyone who listens to the word but does not do what it says is like someone who looks at his face in the mirror and after looking at himself goes away and immediately forgets what he looks like. But whoever looks intently into the perfect law that gives freedom, man, we're going to key in on this, the perfect law that gives freedom, and continues in it, not forgetting what they've heard but doing it, they will be blessed in what they do. This perfect law that gives freedom, here's what we mean by this, or here's what Scripture means by this. It's not that you have to serve people. It's not that you have to bring joy to people who are far from God. You don't have to. You don't have to. You don't have to be the good girl. You don't have to be the good guy. You don't have to be the one that always makes the right decisions, always sacrifices your life so that other people can live. You do not have to do these things. But what we do is we get to do these things. It is a privilege. It is an honor to get to live the truth of the gospel because it sets you free. The perfect law that gives freedom. This perfect gospel message that allows us, rather than be caught up in all the drama of our world, we get set free from that. Because we can see it for what it is, because we're seeing the truth. And the truth will set us free. Verse 26, those who consider themselves religious and yet do not keep a tight rein on their tongues deceive themselves, and their religion is worthless. If you got diarrhea of the mouth, your religion is worthless. I mean, if you've got if you want to know the best way to squash Jesus in your office, just be like everybody else. But make sure they know you're a Christian. I mean, you want to shut Jesus down in every capacity? Make sure there is no difference between you and people who don't know Jesus. Respond exactly the same way. Only focus on the bottom line. Only focus on what's going to promote you and get you what you need. I guarantee you, that's a really easy way to make religion worthless. Because what's going on inside of you? It's not the transformation of the gospel. It's not in the world but not of this world. Here's the culmination of all of it. Verse 27. Religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this: to look after the most vulnerable. The full scope of vulnerability, please. The most vulnerable in their distress. And to keep oneself from being polluted by the world. God desires to turn your natural desires, your natural tendencies, into those that are beyond the laws of nature. The natural world says, distance yourselves from the hurting and the broken. The supernatural says, move towards the hurting and the broken. The natural says, be critical, be judgmental. The supernatural says, be slow to speak. And when you do, speak life into people. The natural says, people rarely change. The supernatural says, it took a miracle for me to change. The natural says this need is too great and I'm just one person. The supernatural says through the one person of Jesus, God offers the forgiveness of sins. He offers freedom to the entire world. God desires you to move towards the hurting and broken. Do you know why? Because you were the hurting and broken that He moved towards. He moved towards you. He is still moving towards you. And if He can change you, the knucklehead you are, the knucklehead I am, He can change anybody, can't He? If he can capture your heart, you think it's impossible for him to capture somebody else's heart? Not at all. You don't have to have everything figured out. You don't have to play everything perfectly. You don't. You know how fragile your situation is. You know how fragile the people's situations are around you. Here's the thing, you're not alone in this. You're not alone, I'm not alone. It's easy to see the sick and the thirsty and the hurting and the broken. It's easy to see those that are in prison. There's a lot of people walking this earth that look like they got it together, but they are one decision away from their world completely falling apart. And they need you. They need you to be near to them. See, these people that have it all together, seem to have it all together, they're still that overweight little child that the popular kids made fun of. They are still that precious little girl whose aunt and uncle robbed them of their innocence. Don't let the outside deceive you. Don't let it seem like things are better than they are. What I'm saying is, in one way or another, when we look at everybody on this planet, there is not a single person on this earth that is not hurting and broken at some point. And when they respond to you in hurtful ways, that needs to be a flag that is raised, that we realize there's hurt. There's hurt in them. And oh my gosh, here I am. And I am God's gift to usher in the Prince of Peace, rather than to spew poison. This is who I am. It's my job to bring joy. Guys, one of the purest and undefiled demonstrations of the gospel is to see hard places and to move towards them. To see broken people and to move towards them, not away from them. But I tell you, we need Jesus, don't we? We need Jesus because we need him to save us from our natural response, our natural reaction. We need Jesus to turn that into a supernatural response, because without Jesus, it's not possible. So Father, we need you. We need you right here, right now. Help us to see the people of this world the way that you see the people of this world. There are so many people who are living an exhausting way of life where everything on the outside looks beautiful. It looks polished and clean, and there is brokenness in their home. There is brokenness in their soul. There is brokenness in their heart. And you have us in this moment, in this time, to speak life into them. To go beyond the surface, to crack this shell. And Lord, we are not good enough for this. We are not talented. We are not smart enough. We don't know enough scripture. We don't know anything that can really do anything. But what we do know, what we do carry with us, is the hope of Jesus. And as we carry the hope of Jesus in our lives, may we respond differently than the world that we live in. And may we move towards brokenness. May we move towards the hurting. And Lord, may we desire freedom. May we desire life. And may we be guilty of those that are dealing that. We love you and we thank you. We pray it through the name of Jesus. Amen.